I'm now going to hand over to Gabriele Bammer to close the conference.
Thanks very much. No, I don't need to see anything, so I'm right. So it just remains now in this last half hour to wrap things up. And let me begin at the very end. There's an interesting phenomenon at conferences, which is what happens when the conference is actually finished. A bunch of people run for planes, and a bunch of people already have run for planes, and a few people are kind of left wondering what to do. So for those of you who are left wondering what to do, we're all going to University House for a drink, and you're welcome to come and join us. Point number one. Point number two, for those people who want taxis and want to potentially share taxis, meet at the reception desk outside afterwards, please. I'm going to say a little bit about where next. We're going to then hear back from the co-conferences. You'll remember that I've asked 4 people in the audience to kind of give a reflection from the audience. We'll do that. And then it remains to do the thank yous. And we've kind of kept the thank yous to the very end. I don't like conferences that do thank yous all the way through. But let me say a little bit about where next. One of the problems is that I get very focused on the event and what the event might come up, I might think. But I never think about, well, if people think maybe we do want to take this a step further, what are we going to do next? So I don't actually know where next. I do know that we're going to send you an evaluation, hopefully next week sometime. We weren't organised enough to do that ahead of time. We had too many other things on our plate. And as part of that, we're going to ask you what you think you'd like to do next. But let me point out that we're not necessarily going to do what you want to do. This is really a way of sharing. Well, it's a way of opening space for people to become active. But let me put it bluntly, the way I put it to my staff, I'm not your research assistant, so you can't tell me what you want to do. I can facilitate a space for you to try to do that. But I would also encourage you to send in comments at any time. So if you're moved now to write things down, because I know by the time we all get back into our workplaces, things will look very different. The pressures of real life will come back onto us. So if you send in comments whenever you feel like it, but there will be a formal opportunity to comment with a bit of luck next week. Some of us are getting together for a post-conference workshop, the plenary speakers basically, and we're going to think about what we'd like to do. I will, if you're comfortable, send you the results of the post-conference workshop, but I'll also send you a collation of what you send in, so I would very much like to hear that. So let's have a quick look at what the co-conference has found. I think one of the things that's been really exciting about this conference is to have co-conferences. And we're going to start with Germany, which had about 20 participants. This was a co-conference held at the University of Leuphana in Lueneburg, and I want to particularly thank Uli Wilsmeyer and Matthias Bergman, who actually had the idea of co-conferences in the first place and put this one together. I was actually supposed to start with Uruguay. I'm very sorry. We're going to do Germany? You're going to stay with me? You're wonderful. They had a group of faculty and also a strong group of masters and PhDs from both Leuphana and Oldenburg University who are working in transdisciplinary projects. They invented PowerPoint karaoke, and I can hardly wait to see what that looked like. But I understand that each person selected a digital poster to comment on. They said they learnt a lot from the digital posters, but they did feel that they could be supported by short personal videos and audio, so they said that was a recommendation. And I have to say that Dan Walker's group did that for their digital poster, which was incredibly effective. So day one they started with 3 plenary talks by Jill Yeager, Merit Polk and Uli and Matthias. Day 2 they started with the plenary panel, and they found that incredibly exciting. And it led to a prolonged group discussion after the plenary panel. So this was the panel on education that you remember from last night. They talked about what it meant, what an online format would look like. They looked at professional identities of students. They looked at the importance of physical and virtual spaces. And they started to think about how to improve their own practice in Leuphana. And interestingly, they decided to end where we started. So they ended with my plenary talk and a discussion of a discipline, but they were way too polite to say what the outcome of that discussion was, so we'll have to wait to find that out. They are going to put this. They've been put on the spot by me to send something in, and they're going to put together a much more professionally balanced video than this one. This was done at 10:30 at night, so give them a break. What I should have done first was Uruguay, so let's move to Uruguay. And I want to particularly acknowledge here Bianca Vieni, who put together the Uruguay co-conference. This is the Uruguay group at 3 o'clock in the morning. I want to ask you how many of you would have come in to support any one of us if we'd been on a panel at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I think the group would have been a lot smaller than that. So they held theirs at this Espacio Interdisciplinario, the interdisciplinary space at the Universidad de República in Montevideo. They put together a bunch of great digital posters that you can find online. Their conference was on Monday and Tuesday, like the German conference, and what they did was provide access to all the activities here and used it as a way of developing a practice that's not yet very well developed in Uruguay. And so they had a lot of discussion about what it meant for them, what the characteristics of interdisciplinarity, integration, implementation are, and what it meant for them. They discussed the plenaries, they discussed the digital posters, and they're now planning to run a bunch of follow-up academic seminars. And last but not least, the Netherlands, which have only finished the first day of their conference, so they're doing theirs Tuesday and Wednesday. The second day of their conference starts about now. And here I want to particularly acknowledge Femke Merks and Ulrich Manns, who did all the hard work of putting their co-conference together. And Femke had the idea and then got Ulrich and the institute that they held it at involved. And if we can play their video, that would be great.
As a first global conference, it was exciting this morning to have speakers from 3 different continents debating with each other about what it means to do education and research in a transdisciplinary manner. And it was also very exciting to have a community come together essentially across these continents, where I felt that there were so many similarities, similar issues, similar questions, and also similar setup and experiments that we can really benefit from exchanging and learning from. And I think that was the main takeaway from this morning, and we will definitely build up on this network in the future. After that, a lively debate here developed on interdisciplinary, but the core of it is basically to figure out how we can place this within or on the verge of universities, in these boundaries between universities and the outside world, and that's the challenge for the coming 2 days, I think.
So what we did with this conference was to invite a community, a research community and a professional community for the first time here in the Netherlands, all people who are working on the verge between science on one hand and policy practice on the other. So we're trying to figure out what is changing these days, particularly from our perspective as a social science faculty. How will that look like in 5, 10 and even 20 years?
So that was the Centre for Innovation at the University of Leiden in The Hague, and I should have said they had 40 to 50 people registered there, and the Uruguayans actually had 30 people registered at their co-conference, which is fantastic. So can I invite the 4 people who are representing the views from here to come to the front, please, to have your 2 minutes of fame. And I wanted to start with Stephen Chaffey, who is going to give the practitioner view, followed by Kelvin Chau, who's going to talk from the group of undergraduates who were here that was sponsored by Lawrence Cram, then Eloise de Gaal, and then finally Christian Roth.
Okay, thank you, Gabriele. I speak on behalf of practitioners and service providers whom there are very few of us left. Most of us have left already of this conference. And what I'm going to bring is comments and questions. And we're really talking about people whose work interfaces between research and the integration and implementation spaces. So some of the comments are as follows. Research, integration and implementation are generally funded as projects within programs and portfolios. There is a difference between the engineering view of project and the social scientist view of project. And everybody would know of stories where projects have wasted a lot of money, over cost, over budget, terrible outcomes and so forth. But there is a very strong body of knowledge of why projects deliver less than they were supposed to. But often in conversations we've had at lunchtime today, the integration space is often one of the biggest weaknesses. One of the common agreements we had that we work for clients and customers, and as Gerald pointed out earlier, we must create or add value to them. And as a result of that, there is often a creative process of discovery to design program and projects, methods, tools and techniques in order to deliver those valued outcomes. The other point made by Lewis was that integrationists, or people working in that I2S space, work in the wider world with all the complexities that arise from that. And he gave the example this morning of his taxi driver who asked him what was he doing today. And he explained he was going to the ANU for an integration and implementation science conference. At that point, the taxi driver glazed over. And Lewis decided that he needed to put it in simpler terms. And he said, "Look, mate, it's just getting something done without stuffing it up, okay?" And the taxi driver said, "Yeah, I understand that." Also, an argument can be put, there's a difference between the activities of research and the activities of integration and implementation. And there's different skills, knowledge and competencies and mindsets that go in and around those 3 different activities. Last point is that science and research are recognised, respected and rewarded, whereas integration and implementation less so. And I'll leave with these 3 questions. How to get market recognition for I2S practice and recognition for I2S practitioners. How to legitimate the science and practice of integration. How to create, nurture, support those working in the I2S space. And I'll pick up on the Master Chef comment in the debate earlier by saying that maybe we need less emphasis on Master Chefs and more emphasis on kitchen cabinets, or at least a balance between the 2. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. I'm going to call now on Kelvin Chau. Thanks.
Hi everyone, and on behalf of all the students, we thank you, all of you guys here, because we all learned a lot from you, and Gabriele and Lawrence, who paid for our fee. And I'd like to start with a comment that I heard from my friends 2 years ago about the things in the world. He said, if undergraduate has control over the world, all problems will be solved. I doubt it, and I come to this conference, and I come under the name not only with like mobilizing research, but with all other students who are under the XSL, the Cross-Disciplinary Students Academy, where we different students come together and talk about issues around the world and try to learn from each other. We're a diverse group of students here with people of science, physics, we have someone from the social science studying sociology, psychology, we got engineer, we got a lot of different people here, just like you guys. And we actually, well, from you guys, we put into this XSL and try to implement some of the ideas from the conference and try to improve the learning experience of other students. And from here, we learn a lot from you guys. Thank you. And a bit of comment on the conference that as students or outside the point of view, that we think there are a lot of similar ideas we find. There are a lot of parallels between the posters and the presentations. And someone even questioned the idea that whether system thinking is a prerequisite for thinking integratively or trying to implement things. And we hope to see a more diverse group of speakers and scholars or even people from the real world and share their experience. And one thing that we think that can be improved a bit is to have more social scientists, people from humanity to talk about things, like historians, like sociologists, like people from the international relations, or even arts and music. Because when we think about orchestra, how can these people collaborate and done this wonderful job? As well as like animators, how can they bring up films like How to Train Your Dragon, an amazing piece of film. And yep, and one more thing to mention is that Zoe, where are you? Zoe over there, she'd like to help in terms of bringing artists or musicians to talk about things in the conference, if people would like to contact her later. And we also like to see a more diverse group of people speaking in this conference, not only in terms of like Australia or the Europe, but also like people from the Africa probably, or from Asia, whether it would be possible to co-host this conference internationally. Yeah, and thank you very much for that.
Eloise Legal.
Thank you, Gabrielle, first of all, for this great event. And thank you, Gabrielle. I love public speaking. Okay, I'm speaking on behalf of early career researchers. And I think we could come up with some publication. There were 3 emerging themes that came out of the conversation we had at lunchtime. And the 3 main points that emerged from this discussion were first, what kind of institutional support is there here or within the university but outside of the university for doctoral students but as well as for postdoc researchers to engage effectively into transdisciplinary research. And we know that words mean different things in different contexts by institutions. We meant the kind of organizations, processes, knowledge management systems, values that would be required to enhance effective transdisciplinary research. The second point, and if I have time I will develop and give more examples in that around this first emerging theme. The second point was the scope of, the second emerging theme related to the scope of transdisciplinary research. somebody came up to me and said, well, that would be great if we could include ethnology, as ethnology relates to the relationships between human beings and ecosystems. I was particularly attracted by the idea of describing the unknown, and another research gap is integrating intuition into research as well, the decision-making process. And another idea that I came across was the idea of futurism, which I was not very familiar with. The third emergent theme that came up during our discussion as well was the one question that was raised was the difference between the discipline of philosophy and meta studies. So some people wanted to know more about the distinction between those two areas. Yes. So I'm not sure. I don't have time to give more examples. So that's pretty much it. Thank you.
And I have to apologise, it's Elodie, not Eloise, Elodie Legal. Christian Roth.
Thanks, Gabrielle. So my sample size was 3, n equal 3, probably because I wasn't accessible enough, and I apologise for that. I had other commitments, but perhaps also because the spokesperson, I'm the spokesperson for the research community. A lot of you have had ample opportunities and had lengthy discourses outside of the formal presentation, so I think a lot of those views are already been made. A couple of points that did come through, and I broaden out my sample to comments that I've sort of heard over the course of the 3 days of this conference, is a generally really positive feeling about what a great space this has been, the exceptional quality of some of the presentations we've had, the thought provocation that came through all of that, and I also had a few colleagues who explicitly wanted to recognize that this experiment of virtual connectedness really did work well. I mean, you warned us it wasn't going to work, but it actually worked. So a big hand for those behind the scenes who've been making it happen. One or two points that did emerge. Question is, I mean, and it came out in this debate, is this craving for a disciplinary home. You know, why do people need a home, be it a discipline or a new discipline called interdisciplinarity? And the question is, what's behind that? Well, why do people need that? And what are the barriers of transcending? What stops us moving around? Is it our institutional barriers? Is it something within us? And I guess for myself, I'm certainly intrigued by the fact that here we've had a lot of people who, well, we're sort of kind of preaching to the converted. And if we want to make a difference in the way research is conducted, we need to have a lot more people partake in our thinking and practice. And how do we reach out to those, and how do we get them engaged? That's my question. And I guess going back into my institution, I'm wondering about what I can do about that. Finally, another comment was that the fact that we ran this in a virtual way lends itself very well to using it as teaching material, and I'd say probably as a way of actually disseminating some of this energy we had here back in our home institutions. And I guess I'd encourage us to try and do that, to broaden out from this community, which obviously is very comfortable with itself. So thanks for that, Gabriele.
Thank you all very much. It was great to have some reflections from those who haven't had a chance to speak yet, and it's always good to hear from those people. We come to the last bit, which is the thank you bit, and what I might do is I might orchestrate the clapping, otherwise we're going to be here for a very long time. So I want to start with thank yous to you, the audience. This has been a really stimulating event for me. I didn't get to spend as much time mingling as I would have liked. That's one of the hazards of being the conference organiser. But it was a great audience. You were very engaged, and it was a really great discussion. And even if you did vote the wrong way in the debate, I'm still very appreciative of the effort that you went to. I want to thank the digital poster authors, some of whom are in the audience, some of whom are not, but I think the digital posters was an experiment. I'll be really interested to hear what you think about it when we get to the evaluation. I also want to thank the speakers and the chairs and the moderators, the speakers for keeping to time. One of the things that made this conference work was that everybody kept to time, and everybody kept to time in a way that also allowed for some questions, which doesn't often happen in conferences, and I think that was great. That was a really great thing to do. The chairs did a superb job, including Alison in the debate. I didn't really thank her properly, and the moderators have done a really great job. The moderators were doing a bit, most of them hadn't had experience doing that before and kind of took it on faith that it'd be all right. So I think that's the first place to have a clap for ourselves, for yourselves, for the speakers, for the moderators, for the chairs. So the second thing I want to do is to talk about, I think I told you right at the beginning that I'm an intellectual risk taker, and one of the things that was challenging was to find companies that would work with us. So we worked with 4 companies as part of this conference, and 2 of them in particular went on the journey with us in a really big way. One of them have already got lots of applause, and at the risk of swelling their heads, I'm going to do one more round of acknowledgement, and that's the company Content Bank, and the part of the company that does this, which is Webcast Cloud, and the 4 men that you see in the room here. So Jesse Sewell, who's been on audio, Brian Fitzpatrick, who's been on camera, Anthony Perrott, who's been the in-room technical coordinator, and Adrian Davis, who's been the unbelievably good-humoured, flexible and professional online technical coordinator. Hold it. The second company that I want to acknowledge is Lucy and Mark and their branch Paperless, who worked with us on the digital posters. We had a false start with the digital posters and we were a month behind schedule. They adapted a system that wasn't built to do what we asked them to do in a very short period of time. Andrew Ritchie, who's the head of that company, donated his time to do it. He and Rohith Mohan did a fabulous job helping us get that system working and keep it working and be very timely in the responses. So they're not in the room, they're not going to hear the clapping, but I think we should include them anyway. So I would really like to acknowledge those 2 companies for working with us. Thank you. So let me ask the volunteers to come to the front of the room. I know, I don't want to come to the front of the room. We've been really blessed with a group of 5 volunteers. Not you, Nicole, we're going to do you separately. Terrific. So these are 5 people who have got an interest in this area, who wanted to come and be part of the event, and I've been absolutely thrilled at what they've done. I hadn't realised how hard it was going to be running up and down these wretched stairs. They are absolutely appalling, and making them do that several times in a session was really very difficult. So let me acknowledge Eric Kennedy. Just hold the applause to the end, please. Veronica Bullock, Jen Zhao, wrong one, Virginia Chau, and Jagannath Adhikari. Thank you to the volunteers. And you all know that these things don't work without an unbelievably dedicated team, and I want to introduce them to you. You've met most of them, you haven't met all of them, they've been a bit behind the scenes, but I wanted to start with Jessica Ford, this person here. For those of you who do academic work and get to work with professional staff, I wish you all a Jessica Ford to work with. Jessica's an unbelievably professional, cheerful and smart young woman, and it's been an absolute delight to work with her. No applause. She's also had the help of a really wonderful assistant, and I've just gone completely blank, Nicole Miller. This is my bugbear. Nicole's a new member of our team at the National Centre for Epidemiology and Population Health, and has fitted in unbelievably well and has been a delight to work with. So thanks to both of you. The second person I want to acknowledge is Andrew Howard, this person here. When we decided to try and be a bit edgy technologically, I needed someone who could hold my hand through this, and Andrew was the person who very kindly did that. He and Peter Dean helped us find this wonderful company that we've been working with, and he's been kind of a backstop for the whole of the process in terms of helping us think about what we were trying to do, what we could do, and how to make what we wanted to do happen. Has been an important liaison with the company that we're working with. Andrew's looking very well dressed today, but he also had a double role. If any of you had misbehaved, Andrew was going to be the person to sort it out for us. Thank you, Andrew. Let me then come to Alison Wain, who's up the end there, who's been our speaker wrangler. Alison came and joined the project, came and joined this project specifically. She and Peter and I were the three people who reviewed the posters, and if you got a kind review, it came from Alison. She's been a really efficient part of the conference, and it's been a real delight for me not to have to worry about a whole lot of stuff and to know that it was going to happen, and it did unbelievably smoothly. So thank you, Alison. And last but not least, I want to acknowledge my long-term colleague, Peter Dean. The team took it in turns to come down with the flu just before the conference, and being the chivalrous man that he is, Peter let the two ladies go first and waited till last to come down himself, and he got the flu last week and this week and has been unbelievably sick. And being Peter and knowing that he was completely, we couldn't do without him, kept soldiering on. So Peter's been responsible for helping us find the companies that we worked with. He's done the webcasting stuff. He's been not the webcasting. He's done the website stuff. He's kept the delegate list up to date. He's kept the program on the website up to date. And if you got a vicious review, that was down to Peter. Peter's got the most penetrating mind and a deep-seated interest in this topic, and has been an absolute joy to work with for more than 10 years now. So that brings us to the end. I hope if you had as much fun as I did over the last 3 days, I think we'll be very happy.
Out of the way, out of the way. So are we going to end without saying a bit about our inspiration? I don't think so. So you're not getting out of it that easily. So I think we just need to, we need to say what an amazing, Gabrielle's pulled this whole conference together. It's her drive, her enthusiasm, and more than anything, her vision that have made this happen, and that will continue to make things happen, extending out from this conference into the future and around the world. And I just think it's been extraordinary, and I hope you'll join me in giving her 3 cheers. Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Thank you, Gabrielle.